Greetings and welcome back to another episode on the Rethinking Faith video cast podcast. We're coming back to you on another episode tonight. We're glad you're here. I'm Mitch, one of your hosts. I'm followed up here with James Ballard and Ray Luke, and we are excited to be back here again tonight. I'm gonna let the guys say hi to you, and then we're gonna get started on an interesting episode. And before I introduce the guys and we get started on that, I want to say a big thank you to the listeners that are beginning to really jump on board, and not only jump on board and listening, but are also asking questions. And that's what we really are here and what we want to do. We have this meeting with the three of us when we do this, and we talk a lot and say things and bring a lot to the table, but it's really it's amazing for us when we get comments, feedback, questions, and things like that help us think, and it helps us to generate things that we want to talk about and pray about. And so I just want to give a big shout out to our listeners. You've been doing a great job of tuning in and just helping let us know that we enjoy it, but that you guys are liking it as well. You guys want to say something? James, I'll come over to you first there, because I know you've been working hard in your backyard today. So tell me how things are going.
Yeah, welcome everyone. If it's your first time, if you've been watching us, we're glad to have you back. Make sure you comment, like below. Give us your questions, like Mitch said. We do really appreciate those. Sometimes we're coming up with topics and they may be interesting to us, but they may not be interesting to anyone else. So, let us know. Yeah, things are good here. We're preparing for Yom Kippur. I like to start building the frame of the sukkah a little bit before, when I have a break. And right now, today was a good day to get that started. So I kind of jumped ahead and started the project. So I'm a little on the tired side. I don't do that much physical labor in a day, but it's all worth it. Right, Baruch Hashem.
James, before we go to Ray, maybe next time we do one of these, you might could bring a picture of what it looks like and let everybody see.
That's nice.
Yeah, just kind of give a quick 5 minute. Well, here's what we got. Here's what we're doing, and I think it looks pretty cool, by the way. So it'd be kind of cool to share that with the audience as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. How about you, Ray?
Hey, blessings, guys. Very glad to be here again with my dear brothers. I'm also grateful for our listeners who really are getting engaged. All the kind comments that we've received, and the shares, all etc. We truly appreciate that, and this is why we do this. We do this for there was people who were there for us, in our journey, in our paths, and who helped us, and may God bless them and continue to guide them. And so we just want to return the favor. We know that this is a very important work, and we try to prepare ourselves as best as possible to be able to answer a lot of these questions. And at the same time, man, we're always learning ourselves. Always open to learn. And tonight we got a new one. We got a new one on Ephesians chapter 2.
Yep.
Yes, sir. Thanks for bringing that up, Ray. We are going to touch on Ephesians chapter 2. And let me just also say, too, that, we do our best to try to bring as much information to the table and as much truth to the table, but we don't know. We don't have all the answers. But what we do try to do is to create a thought process with our listeners. And that to us is achieving our goal. Is if we can get you to begin thinking about how important is your faith? How much do you put behind it? What are those truths that you hinge it upon? And do you really absorb it? Do you really get into it and go beyond just a couple points that you might hear on a Sunday morning or something you might hear on another podcast or whatever? But that's what we try to do. So we are going to open up tonight. We're going to head over into the book of Ephesians. We believe it was to be written by Paul. We're going to touch specifically on verses 1 through 10, I think, as we get started. The title tonight, before I turn it down to my brother Ray and let him get this thing kind of opened up to where we get going with it, we kind of titled it, the riches of God's mercy for the Gentiles. God loves the nations. It's not a thing where God just loves a specific group section or whatever of people, but he actually does love the people of the nations, and those are people like what you're seeing on the screen here. And it's important as we go through these verses that you may have heard things said a certain way once, before, and think back to those times, make notes, and compare what we say and what you've heard before, and then maybe do a little bit of homework yourself, and maybe come back with some comments and let us know what your thoughts are. So Ray, I'm gonna let you set this up, brother, and then we'll just we'll see if we can get James going, and we'll see what we can think of here. All right.
Yeah, definitely. Mitch, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate those words that you said there because I think this brings up, it puts everything together for us in the frame of mind that we need to be in. There's a lot of identity crisis in this path when you get into the messianic movements and a lot of Hebrew Christians and people who are open-minded, trying to learn. One of the questions that always comes up is that from the Gentiles' perspective is, I mean, what does this mean? Am I supposed to become Jewish? Do I have to become Jewish? Because of Christianity, the history that has been antagonistic towards Jews and Judaism, it has not been able to appreciate the Jewish people for who they are, for what their mission is, for
Yes.
how God made them, the covenants that God gave them, and their mission in the world. What is their mission in the world? First of all, to be a sanctified people, a holy people. Okay, holy means to be separated to God and His will, in which they are. And then another one of their big commissions and missions in the world is to be a light unto the nations, unto the Gentiles. And indeed they have been. So it's very important to answer these questions. I don't know how many, there's two different boats that happens with Gentiles. Some who just think it's not good enough to be a Gentile. I have to become Jewish. Okay. And some who, they don't really want to become Jewish. And so they feel like, what am I, second class? And all the learning that I'm doing, and many people think this. And this is just, it's very sad that it's this way, is because there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of bad teachings out there. And we want to clear some of that stuff up. Okay. Paul is a Pharisee. He's Jewish. And he clearly says this over and over again. Never stop being Jewish. His faith never stopped being Torah Judaism. A Pharisee. This is the way he says it. Okay. I was once no. I am a Pharisee, he says. And this Pharisee was commissioned by God through the Messiah to be the apostle, means the messenger of God to the nations. We have a Pharisee as our teacher, okay, as one of our teachers. And us Gentiles, we need to appreciate the Jewish people.
Yes.
We need to appreciate them. We need to know that there's so much for us to learn from them. And this is the way that God has set things up. Okay. Priests of God means that they are the teachers of the oracles, of his scriptures. They're the teachers. They're the ones that's going to teach us the correct way. I mean, Jesus himself said, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So listen to everything they say. Everything they teach you, listen to it. Okay? Now, as we get into Ephesians, I think this is going to clear up some of these things. There's nothing wrong with being a Gentile, as much as there's nothing wrong with being a Jew. Okay? The faith of Jesus, Torah Judaism, maybe a lot of people are not aware, is a faith that is universal. It has room for Gentiles, and of course it has room for Jews. Okay, the revelation of God was given from the Creator to the Jewish people, so there's room for everyone. This is the way that God would bring salvation unto mankind, was going to be through this vehicle of the Jewish people. We need to get with that program. Okay, there's nothing wrong with being Gentile, and Paul's message was, you don't need to convert. God loves you as you are. Okay. And now we're going to get into some of the mechanics of what that looks like here as he's consistently teaching this in Ephesians. So I'm going to read these passages, and then we'll start tagging them. We'll start explaining some of them. So the passages in Ephesians goes like this. chapter 2, verse 1 says, "And you were dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind. But God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Messiah. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up with him, and seated us with him in the heavenly places, in Messiah Yeshua, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace and kindness towards us in Messiah Yeshua. For by grace you have been saved through faith, through Munah. And this is not of your own doing, it is a gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua for good works, which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them." All right.
Wow.
James, you want to start off, my brother?
Yeah, this is good. We have a bunch of episodes that if someone has been watching or listening, you can probably piece these together and these things will start to make sense to you. If you haven't, we have to understand that in this time, this context, 80 years before the destruction of the temple, the Talmud says that the nations were deemed impure because of idolatry. Most, if not all, most of the religions around the time when Israel was a nation and the Jews were in the diaspora around Paul's time, they were involved in idolatry and pagan practices, which brought a level of tumah, a degree of, it's a very high level. It's a transgression, we'll call it. It's not like a typical sin. These are, the levels of the sins. It's up there with murder and gossip and some really bad stuff. And it brought such an impurity, it would take righteous people and knock them down a level. And we see the evidence of this when Peter is afraid to go near Cornelius in Acts 10. And it's because partly they were dead. And Ray, I know you have some thoughts on this as well, but the idea of being dead in your trespasses and sins, they're dead because they don't have Torah. They don't have any way of pulling themselves out of that deficit of impurity. And this is how Paul starts. You were dead in your trespasses and sin, which you once walked, following the course of the world. So the rest of the world apparently is in this state of impurity. And that's what Judaism maintains, that the default state that we all live in today is a state of impurity. We have to work to climb out of that. The Torah is how we climb out of that. But if you're a pagan Gentile in the time of Paul, you had no access to the Torah. But what they were witnessing at this time is something changed. And in our atonement episode we just did, the evidence that some atonement had been made, or something that cleared away some of that tumah, enough for the Gentiles to receive the divine presence, was happening in their time. And they had to figure out, what is this? This doesn't make any sense. This shouldn't be happening, but it is happening. Boom, paradigm shift, new reality.
Amazing. Amazing. That's big, man. I know here in verse 1, something sticks out to me, and you just touched on it, James. And I would like to ask our listeners, Paul, he says, "And you were dead in the trespasses and sins in whence you were once walked." Now, I would ask, how are they dead? Even if I were to sin right now, if I got busy sinning, I'm not dead. I'm still very much alive. And people live entire lives, sinning their entire lives, and they're not dead. They're still alive. They're not dead until you're dead, right? That's the way that I would understand it as a normal, logical person. But the problem is, we need to get to the historical and religious context of what Paul, who is a Pharisee within Torah Judaism, what is he talking about? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? So what happens is that Paul is speaking from a perspective where we are not we're not connected to this holy tradition that the Jewish people have stemming all the way back to Moses. The Gentiles are not connected to it. And so that can mean whatever to them, whatever they may think it means, but it has a specific context. And I'm getting ready to give it to you guys. This type of concept, being dead in your trespasses while still alive, it's a real concept within Torah, okay, within the writings of the rabbis that was alive back then in the first century. And I'm going to read it to you. You find it in the Talmud, okay, in Berachot 18a, okay? I'm going to read it to you. It's a lengthy one, but I'm going to give you the entire context so you can understand. It says like this. Rabbi Yonatan said to him, do the dead know so much? Isn't it stated, and the dead know nothing? Ecclesiastes 9:5. Rabbi Hiya said to him, if you read the verse, you did not read it a second time. And if you read it a second time, you did not read it a third time. And if you read it a third time, they did not explain it to you properly. The meaning of the verse, for the living know that they would die, and the dead know nothing and have no reward, for their memory has been forgotten. Ecclesiastes 9:5. For the living know that they will die. These are the righteous, who even in their death are called living. An allusion to this is as it is stated. And Benayahu, son of Yehoiada, son of the valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done mighty deeds, he smote the 2 altar hearths of Moab. He went down also and slew a lion in the midst of a pit in the time of snow. This is a quote from 2 Samuel 23:20. The Gemara continues. It says, he was referred to in the verse as son of a living man. The Gemara wonders, is that to say the fact that the Bible referred to him with that appellation that all others are children of the dead? Question. Rather, the verse should be explained as follows. The son of the living man who lives forever, who even in death is referred to as living. Man of Kabzeel, who had done mighty deeds, as he accumulated and gathered many workers for the sake of Torah, who killed the 2 lion-hearted men, Ariel of Moab, as after his father, he left no one his equal, in either the first temple or the second temple periods, as the temple is called Ariel, see Isaiah 29:1. And the 2 Ariel refers to the 2 temples. I'm going to skip a little bit here so we can get to the point of Paul. So now it says, in contrast to the righteous who are referred to as living even after their death, the verse states explicitly, the dead know nothing. These are the wicked who even during their lives are called dead, as the prophet Ezekiel said in reference to a king of Israel who was alive. And you are a slain, wicked prince of Israel. That's quoted in Ezekiel 21:30. Did you see how it referenced a man who was alive as if he were dead? Because he is dead in trespasses and sins. Exactly what Paul says.
If you remember, which is great that you pull that source, and for anyone that's kind of struggling with the Talmud, all of this comes from all these concepts that the rabbis pull. They source them in the Torah. We may be reading them, but they're a few degrees downstream from the Torah, but often they'll quote the wisdom or the prophets, but they'll track it back to the Torah. And the root of this comes from Leviticus 18:5. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my rules. If a person does them, he shall live by them. I am the Lord. And we see the same idea in Hebrews 10:38. The righteous one shall live by faith. Of course, he's talking about, or the writer is talking about Habakkuk. The righteous will live by faith, emunah, shall live. Obviously, the living, according to the sages, is in the world to come. And then again, Paul uses that in Galatians when he says in Galatians 3:12, the law is not of faith. Rather, he's making a contrast between what the law is and what it isn't. And he says it's not of faith. Rather, the one who does them shall live by them. So it's a pro-Torah commandment that Paul is talking about in Galatians there. But he's using the language of the sages because he himself taught by them. Right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And just to finish the Gemara off, it says, and if you wish, say instead that the proof is from here. He quotes another passage in Deuteronomy which says like this. He says, and if you okay, and it says, at the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, the dead shall be put to death. Deuteronomy 17:6. He's already quoting him as if he was dead. They're already mentioning the people who are alive, the wicked, they're alive, but they're already dead in their trespasses and sins. The Gemara continues. It says, this is puzzling. As long as the accused has not been sentenced to death, he is alive. Rather, this person who is wicked is considered dead from the outset. Let us return back to Ephesians. I mean, that is incredible, but it is literally, guys, listen to me, our listeners. This is word for word. There is no other way to understand what is going on in the New Testament. There's nothing, that's such a horrible name for it. There's nothing new in the New Testament. It's all found in the Torah. This was Yeshua and the apostles' bread and butter from the moment they were born to the moment of their deaths. This is all they knew, okay? And it's important for us to understand that. We are the ones that need to get back to this context and this path. To finish the passage, go ahead, my brother.
Yeah, just a second real quick. You brought up an interesting point where I think maybe the last several episodes that we've done, we've talked a lot about a different level of interpretation, a different level of understanding. And for those out there that are listening, coming from the Christian community, thought, study patterns that go along with that, a lot of times that superficial surface area is going to give you an interpretation. Again, we've all talked about different lenses and different, interpretations and then translations, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the biggest eye openers, I think, for someone sorry about that, for someone like myself is the understanding the depth of the knowledge that goes into what's written within what Christians call the New Testament. Now, I heard somebody say today that they were going to teach on the person of Jesus, and as they were going to teach on him, they were going to use a specific gospel, and they were using that gospel because it was less Jewish in how it was written. This is what was said. Okay, I'm sitting here listening to this, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, here he goes again. He's about to steal Jesus. He's about to steal Yeshua away from who he is and put him back into that same pattern again. And the people out there that are listening at that surface level and are not understanding the cultural, the heritage to it that you have just spoken about. And it's sad that there are thousands and thousands of people, that walked away from that today. And that's what they got, and that's what they're going to get out of this series on the teaching of Yeshua. So it's very fascinating as many times as I've read Ephesians 2 or even the book of Ephesians to even think about it off that surface level of what you read of just that translation and of that interpretation. But to get into where you're talking about things, like the comparison to the Gemara and compare, and we'll help explain that a little bit more as we get through this. But guys, it's just it's trailblazing for those of us who have spent a couple of decades trying to just decipher what we're reading on this surface level, man. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ray, and I think that broken something came out of my house here. So I don't know if you heard it, but
no, I didn't.
Go ahead, man.
We didn't hear. Appreciate it, man. That's good. That's great stuff, man. And for sure, man, this is exactly why we do this work. I mean, we've been talking about that. Continue on here in Ephesians. It says, after the part of being dead in trespasses and sins, it says, now Paul says, and James he just mentioned this in the beginning of the video, says, in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience. I'll stop there. And in which you once walked. So remember, who is Paul's audience? The Gentiles. The Gentiles is his audience. Okay, not just any Gentiles, These are Gentiles who are turning. They went by various names, the God-fearers. Okay, um, there's another term in the Torah called, I think it's in English, is resident alien or the foreigner among you, which is a ger toshav. Okay, this is a righteous Gentile. Okay, and it says he's talking to these Gentiles who are righteous, and he's saying, in which you once walked, and you were dead in your trespasses. You were like dead men walking, following the course of this world. The course of this world is blinded and almost captive to who? Following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience. I'm going to give you a controversial interpretation of that before I hand it over to James here. It's an interpretation that Christians and most Messianics, and some Messianics are very much aware of this interpretation. That is, for the most part, Christians say that this is who? This is Satan. This is the devil. Okay? But according to Torah, according to the rabbis, according to Yeshua, his understanding and their understanding of what this is not so simple as if God has some arch enemy, the devil. Even the devil is subject to God and does God's will. No, it's controversial, but when he says this, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit, that is now, that word spirit, the devil, Satan, according to Judaism, is, the Gemara says that it is Satan, the evil inclination, and the angel of death are one.
Yep.
Wow. They're one. So Paul's saying that the Gentiles have this in them. Everybody does. Jew and Gentile have this evil inclination.
Yep.
The Yetzer Hara. This is what he's talking about. And the Gentiles, having no tools to be able to fight it, are following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience. They follow it because they have no alternative. They don't know how to be able to use that divine holy side within them, the other side that God gives us to combat it, which is called the Yetzer HaTov, which is the good inclination, the holy inclination. James?
Yeah, this is really astute. I mean, we're what, 3 verses in now, and these are major pillars of certain doctrines that are being rattled here. Because of the sin of Adam, everything went from a unified, integrated whole to a world of duality and multiplicity. And unfortunately, I'm thinking of the Midrash. And James says it. He says that the Torah of freedom, the law of liberty, he calls it.
Yes.
That ties to the Midrash the sages have. They say the Torah, the same word for engraved, when God engraved the letters of the Torah into the tablets, cherut is cherut. It's freedom. And they say, don't read it as engraved, read the Torah as freedom. And the next question says, who is this? What's the Torah freedom from? And they said the angel of death in the Midrash.
Wow.
So again, we're coming back to pro-Torah statements here, although people can, in the next passages we'll get to, take the complete opposite understanding because we don't have the Midrash as part of our psyche. We've never heard these things until now, if we've heard them at all. But that's the default working state of everything on earth because it's been degraded. And to your point, Paul makes a distinction here in the next passage. He says, number one, in Ephesians, and the readers may know this, he is very consistent when he says us, talking about the Jewish people, and you, the Gentiles. And when it's an us together, it's clear. But then there's many times in this book, he'll say you, for you. And then he makes a distinction in this next passage here, and also in Ephesians 4:17, where in Ephesians 4:17 he says, "You must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds." So he has split this audience now. They're Gentiles, they're not Jews, but they're not pagans like everyone around them. And I have a verse here as well. He does this twice in Acts 13 when he goes into Antioch. In verse 16, Paul stood up in the synagogue and he says, "Men of Israel, and you who fear God, listen," right? So he's talking to Jews and he's talking to God-fearers, you who fear God, people who are not Jews, who are Gentiles. And then in verse 26 of Acts 13, he says, "Brothers, sons of the family of Abraham, B'nai Avraham," which are converts, "and those among you who fear God." So
Mm-hmm.
you know the terms, like in a synagogue, a B'nai Avraham is somebody who converted, if
Yep.
you're familiar with the vernacular in the Jewish community. So he says, brothers, converts, and those who fear God. And we're seeing that same language here in Ephesians 2.
Wow.
He's making distinctions between this new category the apostles are dealing with, these Gentiles who aren't Jewish, but somehow were removed from the power of the prince of the air, the spirit that's at work. Somehow they've been lifted out of that. And he's distinctly calling them as such. They're a different group. He separates them because something amazing is happening in their time. And they're not quite, there's no precedent for it so much.
Right. Amazing.
That
Amazing. Mitch, just to say one more thing on this passage about, the good inclination and the evil inclination, which we're talking about here, which is this prince of the power of the air, Satan, which we know it's one and the same. Isn't it funny that in many cartoons, they'll picture like someone getting ready to do something and they're not supposed to do it, and they get the good little angel and the devil on the other side.
Right.
But if you think about it, guys, think about it. And we're all tested in this way. If you're tested with something that you know you're not supposed to do, where does that voice come from that either puts it into your mind to do it, and then you have a fight within your soul, in your mind, of, hey, go do that. And you'll be like, yo, what? And then you're thinking about the other one says, hey, don't do that. I'm not doing that. What is this voices in your mind? Isn't that the same person? Or what's going on?
Yeah.
This is the battle between the good inclination and the evil inclination that is always at war. The moment you wake up your eyes, the evil inclination is right there. Hello, good morning. Good morning. He's right there. The battle is on. From the moment you wake up till you go to sleep. Consistent, until the day that we don't ever pass, this battle will not change. It will not change. There's ways that the rabbis explain that you can subjugate the evil inclination to make it work for holiness. But man, the most righteous are the ones who get there. It takes a lot of work. And not saying you can't do it, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's keep going. Now it says, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh. Paul does this a lot. Amazing. This shows that the guy was a mensch, meaning he was a very good guy, a very good guy. He puts himself. Remember that Paul in his letter says, can you accuse me of any sin? According to the law, I was blameless. But how is it here that he's now saying that I too once walked according to I was dead, and he's putting himself with the audience that he's speaking to, so that he can it's a language that you do so you can be connected to your audience, right?
Yes.
So he says, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh. Yes. See, this is a good teacher. This is a good person that's trying to really get to his audience. And then he says, carrying out the desires of the body, the evil inclination, that it attacks that place where you're most vulnerable at, where humans are not really connected to the soul, to their neshama, to the good inclination. It attacks where you're most weak at. We're not supposed to act like animals. When we're hungry, we eat. When we want this, we'll go get that. No, you're supposed to be led by your spirit, by your soul, by something higher than you. Okay? And then it says, we were carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath. He's talking about the Gentiles. Of course, if you're consistently sinning and you're children of wrath, you're causing curses. Remind yourself of the Torah. The Torah, if you do it, good will come up. And if you don't do it, curses come upon you. Gentiles are under a similar covenant. Yeah. Okay? God punished the generation of who? The generation of the flood. Did he not?
Yes.
Was the Torah given then? So that means that there is a universal law over the entire world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did he not? Was he not going to destroy Nineveh? They're not Jews. And they did what? They practiced tshuva, they practiced repentance, they fasted, and they did what was right, and God averted the destruction that he was going to do.
Wow.
All right. So it says now, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and we're by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind. But God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, check this out, this is amazing, the Creator. He says, but God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, there he goes again, made us alive together with Messiah. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up with him, and seated us with him in heavenly places in Messiah Yeshua. James, Mitch, you guys want to say, this is a whole lot going on here. You guys want to comment on this?
Go ahead, Mitch.
Well, first of all, just touching back for a second, Ray, on the whole talk, the whole piece that you did on the evil inclination and the opposite of it. I've never seen anything like, until I was exposed to Judaism and to ways of combating the evil inclination. There's nothing that comes close to it on the other side. And, I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying that when you look at things like Musar, the study of the of the human ethics, this is what Yeshua was a master of. I mean, he was a master of Musar, and Christians, if they really follow his message, they'll see that. And so that was something that was constantly on his mind in helping the disciples and those that were listening to him, is that regeneration of that thought process every day when you wake up. And there are certain prayers, Jewish prayers, that help that process kick along. I've never, in the decades that I participated in trying to help people get over certain things or work through certain things, never saw work and patterns like what I see within the Jewish world that should be a part of what we do. I mean, that is who we are when we say that we follow Yeshua. But I just wanted to add to that, Ray, and James, that it's amazing. And I'm hoping that down the road that we can do maybe an episode or two on Musar and just how important that is as we break it down and you look at it and how you can implement it in your life. Doesn't take a whole lot. It just takes your conscience being willing to go face to face with the stuff that you deal with and how you can improve upon it. But it's fascinating. And also, when we talk about, I think, Ray, where you were saying here, Christ by the grace have been saved. Okay, this is in verse 5. Even when we were dead through our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ by grace, you have been saved. Okay, when a Christian reads that, they obviously pick up on it as, okay, here's the golden ticket. Here's the I'm this new man. I'm this new, I'm this new person in Christ. Okay, and that there are certain ways that's described from a platform. There's certain ways that's opened up and peeled back, looked at. Nowhere then, I think, the way James may touch upon here in just a second, do those of us that have come from that particular lens see it for what it really is. And what are we being saved from? And I think I read somewhere, and you guys can correct me, where in rabbinic thinking, that the process of being saved and justified and so forth, that's something that comes down the road. It's not something that happens like boom right then.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's not like you put a quarter in the machine and boom, you got your ticket and you're good to go for the ride. It's something that comes down the road, and that's something that's in the mind of a lot of Christians and in the mind of a lot of how it's taught is, of course, once you say that prayer and you pull the lever down and you get your ticket, you're good to go, man. And so, James, I'm going to let you unfold that a little bit more, as I'm sure you'll put some good thought behind it.
Yeah, when I was in the church, I never got a ticket. They must not have had that machine.
I got a ticket one time right out the back door. It was,
like I must have missed out.
no, you did good.
So yeah, the idea of saved, saved is such a loaded word. The church has packed it with its own doctrine and theology, and I often have people ask me questions, very good people, close people I'm friends with. And when we get to the saved, the salvation question, are the Jews saved? All this idea about salvation, no matter what I say, there's a mountain of preconceived ideas that are almost impossible to pick at. So I don't like saying saved because of that. It's a loaded word. But redeemed, in the Jewish mind, redeemed could be from a situation. It could be from redeemed from a very physical situation, not a spiritual one, of we have an oppressor who is going to do something to our nation, and we've been, Yeshua came
Saved
from
from that.
heaven,
Yep.
right? Hashem gave us Yeshua, right? The word salvation, redemption from that. It can be
From
finite,
sickness.
healed, right? It also has a way of like being healed. I think what Paul is saying here is, and he says this, we've been redeemed from this situation. What situation? The way the rest of mankind is living, this terrible, very painful road that they're going to head to Gehenna. They're going to have to be punished and disciplined, and then afterlife they're going to hit Gehenna for some amount of time. It's just a very painful process, and they've been saved from it through the apparent death of Yeshua, which is no different than the Jewish idea of connecting to a tzaddik. Now, you can lose that, though. You can go back, and the New Testament does teach this in other places. You can go back and you can fall backwards to the way the rest of mankind is living, and you've severed yourself from that.
Definitely.
But what he's saying here is, in the coming age, right, in the Olam Haba, we've been seated. Part of our soul is, I try not to go into Sod. I said I would try to keep it to Peshat, Josh. Paul did it. You can't help it.
Exactly.
It's here.
You can't help it. No, you can't.
So if you're listening, before we did this episode, I tried to make a vow not to go into mystical level, but Paul is clearly referencing.
Paul already lost. Paul already lost.
he dragged us all into it. So this is again Ibor language. Part of our soul has been connected to God through intermediaries, and in the world to come, the way the Ibor works, provided you stay a suitable host for that soul augmentation, you go to where that righteous person is. That's how it works. That's what Chabad teaches with the Rebbe. It's you stay connected to the Rebbe. Why? Because when you pass away, if you do, you go to where the Rebbe is. It's the Arizal teaches this. Rebbe Isaac
Yeshua says that wherever you are, there I will be, and vice versa.
Rebbe
It's the same.
Nachman,
Yeah,
Rebbe Nachman teaches it. It's this idea that your soul upon death, in life and also upon death, will be commuted to a higher level than you would have earned, and that's what the entire concept of Ibor is about. And Paul is saying it's seated next to Hashem, is what he's technically saying here, or in the heavenly places, right, in Messiah. These are really high, lofty, mystical concepts, and it's because of grace and through their emunah in believing this, that they've been redeemed from this treadmill that everybody else, the rest of mankind, is on. That's what Paul's saying here in my read.
Beautiful. No, and then now that was beautiful. That helps to frame my mind and what I was going to say. And this is something we talked about, James, that we're going to touch on this in another episode. So I'm just going to maybe just slightly say a few words on it, but we're going to touch on this in an episode. Again, but God being rich in mercy because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Messiah.
Yeah.
By grace you have been saved and raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ and Messiah Yeshua. So, I mean, we can still be right here on earth alive, but we're seated with Messiah who was raised from the dead, a phenomenon that because this is not just no regular resurrection. I mean, the widow's son, Elijah raised the widow's son, and he later died.
Mm-hmm.
See, the death of Messiah and his resurrection, he's called the first fruit from the resurrection. So that means that the ultimate resurrection, which is still in the time to come, when all the righteous will resurrect and never have no more death, this is the resurrection of Yeshua. And now he is seated in heaven, alive. So Paul is saying that we who have been, quote unquote, saved are with him, raised up with him, and seated with him. Okay? Very, very interesting. Now, I wanted to say this. The Jewish people, they have a covenant with God. And the entity of Israel, we can call it an entity. The entity Israel, this entity is holy, just, and good, and is saved. Not the individual members, the entity is. Now, how are the individual members, once they come in and stay within the entity, they too are saved. And how do you do that? By participating in the covenant. You can either cut yourself off from the entity or stay within. This is the same thing that's going on here with the Gentiles. The same exact thing being in Messiah. That's why how James said that this is not like once saved, always saved. You can lose this. You can get cut off. You can get cut off if you do not participate in the covenant, which is in the Messiah. The Messiah is the head of the body of this entity. And so if we are allegorically in Messiah, we have to do the will of God. That's why you'll see here at the end of Ephesians, it says that we were made in Messiah for good works, or else you'll be cut off. Okay, we're going to touch upon that in
That's
another
very
video.
strong wording you just used. Okay, go ahead, James. But I mean, you're throwing hard balls right there, man. I mean, those are solid pitches.
Well, he says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah for good works that God prepared beforehand back when Adam was created." All of this language we're going to see in a second here is going back to Adam. Everything goes back to Adam. We said this in past episodes. God prepared that we do this work. Adam was given 2 commands to guard and to work. And God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So now that you've been raised back up to the level, right? We said this in our last episode, atonement is not the end. Atonement is a remediation to get you back on track so that you continue on track. So he's saying here, we're the workmanship through Yeshua for good works that God prepared back at the time of Adam, that humans should have been doing all along. We shouldn't have crashed the way we did, that we should walk in them now. He's telling you what you need to do, not, oh, he got rid of the Torah here. No, he's telling you you've been redeemed from this terrible situation so that you can get back on track.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, there's so many levels of truth here. I mean, you could read this verse and it'll reveal to you a truth, and then you can read it again because there's various levels. And these rabbis, Paul, they knew this. There's something that I wanted to mention that is by Mark Nanos, okay? And a lot of the work that he's done with a lot of other scholars, okay? Some people read this right here, and it says, he repeats himself again. He says it again. He says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, through Amunah." Okay? Amunah is not like some mental assent. I accept all the statements of faith. That's faith. No. Amunah is is a whole lot to it. Amunah means, believing in God, doing God's will. It's a whole lot. Doing God's will is works, This emunah is a faith that works, that does works. Okay, and then he says, and this is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God. Everything is by the gift of God. God chose the patriarchs because of his mercy, because of his grace. And their children, they're saved. They're going to be saved because of God's promises to the patriarchs. Very similar to the idea of Gentiles being saved because of the Messiah. Same thing. This is the same idea. You talk to a Jew, he says, you're gonna be saved because you think you're good enough? He'll laugh at you. That thought has never even entered his mind. He says, we're going to be saved because God said so. I mean, God has promised something to our forefathers. And we do the will of God because, we're within this. We're in this. We're in this whole thing. We're in our patriarchs. The patriarchs did the will of God. We are too. They never thought that they're just because they're going to be good enough, because they're going to. No. We do this because this is the will of God. And we are within the children of Israel. This is what we do. Same thing has to be the thought process for Gentiles who say they claim that they follow the Messiah or are in Messiah Jesus, right? Then he says, it is the gift of, not a result, here it is. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. Now listen to what Mark Nanos says. And it's talked a lot about in the book of Galatians. Mark Nanos has a commentary on Galatians. There's a bunch of great scholars that have to Daniel Lancaster, and they touch upon this. They say, remember who is Paul's audience? Paul's audience are Gentiles, okay? And one of his biggest missions is to combat something that was happening in his day, combating certain people that were telling the Gentiles, they were not good enough as Gentiles. They had to be circumcised and become Jewish in order to be saved. There was no other way. There's no other way. Circumcision is akin to saying you're Jewish now. Okay, it's a process. There's a legal process that has begun. You had to be circumcised. You had to go dunk in a mikveh, and there was a little process, and you became a full-fledged Jew. You was as Jewish as a person who was born from a mother who was also Jewish. Okay, and now you was obligated to the entire covenant like a Jew. So this group was telling the Gentiles, hey, it's not good enough that you just have faith in God and that you believe in Jesus. That's not enough. You guys are covered in idolatry and impurity, and you have to become Jewish because we know that the entity Israel is saved, and this is the only way. So Paul was combating that. Paul was saying, no, what you need is to have true faith. Disregard idolatry. Begin to do the will of God as you're obligated to. Whatever, the Acts 15, whatever those things that you have to be engaged in, do that. So when he says here, it is a gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. This work is a specific work that he combats consistently. So this work is the work of circumcision to become Jewish. This is what Mark Nanos says. He says it in Galatians. He says it in a few places that this is a specific work. It's not talking about works like the works of the Torah, like the mitzvot. He's not talking about that. He's talking about a specific commandment, and that was specific for the Jewish people or for those who were going to engage in conversion. I wanted to say this too. Conversion is not a bad thing, but it is for specific people. It was never meant that the whole world was going to be Jewish. God is great enough and amazing enough, and the promises that will be fulfilled to the patriarchs when he told Abraham that through you and your seed, him, the Jewish people, the Messiah, all the nations would be blessed. If there are no nations and everybody's Jewish, then that cannot be fulfilled. Okay, so this work is a specific work. It's not the works of the Torah. We're supposed to do that. He just says right here, keep reading. He says, for we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua for good works. Isn't that a contradiction, James?
Yeah, it would be. It would be, except for, to your point, in verse 11, he starts talking about circumcision. So he's connecting, he's grouping those concepts together to give a little bit more insight to what you're saying from the scholarly opinion.
Yeah, man. So here in the last verse, so we could close up, he says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." Amazing, right? I just said that.
Yeah.
I said, look, God has a covenant with the Jewish people. It was made on Mount Sinai, but there was law. There was universal law. There was a universal obligation upon mankind.
Yes.
From before time. That's what he says. God prepared it before time, and we should walk in them. It's something that the Jews know as the Noahide code, the code of Noah. Okay, and it's certain obligations that humanity has. The Jewish people have a specific mission, and anyone who becomes Jewish is obligated to that entire covenant, that entire law that was given to them on Mount Sinai. Okay.
Yeah.
So Adam knew about this, because if he didn't know about it, why did God cause him with transgression if there was no law? Of course there was law. They knew about these things. We don't know them because we have no insight. The insight is the oral tradition. Without the oral tradition, we're literally, guys, we're lost. And you won't be able to understand what's going on here in the Bible. You can't understand it.
Amazing.
Very good. Very good, guys.
If I can add one point, just we'll make it, maybe call it 3 to 4 minutes of one extra point.
Sure.
Yep.
It doesn't need to be its own episode, but it really ties back to what you're saying and what we're kind of reading here. And now that we're going back through it, I'm seeing it again. So up until this point, Paul is making the very clear case that being circumcised and converting to Judaism is not the path for every Gentile. You shouldn't ever, not everyone should do that, right? Eschatologically, there is a belief that like you said, Ray, both people have to be one body restored, right? Back together. But what's interesting is in the next passage here, I won't read the whole thing, the idea of the new man, the church has historically taken that to say everybody needs to be Christian, whatever that looks like, wherever you are in the world, because as you know, denominations look different even in the same city, much less you go to Israel and you see the Armenian church or the Coptic church, and you see that they're very different from American. They're different from each other, but they're very different from American. So which new man are we all supposed to be? Are we all, are Jews are all supposed to convert to Christianity? Because it seems Paul is trying to very clearly keep those camps intact. So again, you know, in verse 11, he talks about circumcision, like you said, and he's trying to teach them that they don't need to go through that. You guys are already part of this community now. As we learn in Galatians, doing that's going to make you subject to a covenant and responsibilities that you probably aren't ready for, right? And that's what a good rabbi would say. They wouldn't just let people convert at will. You need to test them. And then in 13 he says, "But now you who were once far off are brought near," right? So he's talking about you. It's temple terminology. The wall of hostility, right? It's kind of referencing the temple, right? The court of Gentiles is on the far outside, and Israel is increasingly more into the center to the temple, that we might both be reconciled. I'm skipping ahead here to verse 15, by abolishing the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in place of the two, so making peace, and might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross. Now, the word for new man here is the same word for Adam. And if you remember what we said in the beginning of this, everything is collapsed into duality and fractals, and it's broken because of the sin of Adam. Midrash, and you can find this in the Talmud, Sanhedrin 38b, and many other places, Midrash Rabbah. Adam was created by the dust of everywhere in the world, and it was the most important part of Adam that was the dust from Israel. Some even say that the temple area, Jerusalem, where the temple is. But the Midrash, first Adam, was a composite of all the nations. This is before Adam sinned, and there needed to be a Torah, and there needed to be a nation of priests. we're talking back to the time when everything was all encapsulated in one person, both physicality and spirituality. And we know Paul uses that language all the time. He's talking about first Adam, second Adam. That's from the Midrash.
Yep.
So what he's doing here is he's reversing that. Both Jews and Gentiles together in the world to come will be reintegrated back into the body of Adam, back into the soul of Adam. Now,
Yep.
until that day, as he says up in higher up in the passages here, until that day, until we get to the world to come, it's something we have to hope for. But the distinctions very much still exist. The Torah still very much exists because our
Yep.
context hasn't changed. And from their time to our time, the context still hasn't changed. The redemption hasn't happened yet. May it be soon, but it hasn't happened yet. But what he's doing is he's leveraging the Midrash beautifully, as he always does. And if people aren't aware of that, they may come to the conclusion that neither Jew nor Gentile exists anymore. It becomes Christian, and that's the new model. And of course, we know Christianity didn't exist yet. And Paul already in this passage is doing his best to ensure that we're one body of people, but we're two different people groups working for the same goal. That in itself is beautiful. But until we are reintegrated back in, as the Midrash says, that's how it has to stay. So my problem as a Jew has been when Christians will aggressively try to convert Jews to this new man model, which is really just Christianity. And the typical understanding in Christianity is anti-Torah. The commandments are no longer valid. And when you do that, you're pulling Jews out of their covenantal responsibility, and you're doing what the New Testament very strongly tried to protect from happening. So I just want to write that down. We didn't have to make an episode on it, but on one side, it's the balance to what Paul said before. Now we're rectified as one people group in the same community, but both have to remain, or should consider remaining where they are. If one wants to convert to Judaism, it happens. It's a beautiful thing. But Paul's saying, stay the way we are, because that's the picture of the kingdom. That's the picture of the Messianic kingdom. All the nations coming back to Israel and everyone worshiping God. That's what we see in Zechariah 14, right? That's when we see even Sodom is reintegrated back into Israel. In Samaria, reintegrated. That's what the prophets teach us. That's the picture, not everyone gets converted to one side or the other. That's
no, definitely.
So,
Definitely. That's amazing, James, because that is what Christianity has taught. You know, when they've gotten any Jew to believe in Jesus, what that literally means to come into this new man means that you're no longer Jewish, and that you stop doing anything that's connected to Jews. That means Judaism, right?
yeah.
I hate to say that when someone converts, I hate to say it like this. I hate to say that when someone converts, they converted to Judaism. No, you don't convert to Judaism. You convert to the people of Israel, and you become a Jew.
Yeah.
Judaism is a universal religion. It is the universal faith of God. Okay, this is what we call the faith of the Bible, Yiddishkeit, Judaism, right? So when someone converts, he doesn't convert to Judaism. He converts to the people. You come into the people of Israel, and your faith, the faith that we call, that God gave the children of Israel, is Judaism. But this faith is not a cult. It's not some cultic tribal religion. It is open for the world. It is open for the world. And so this is the thing that's beautiful, and which James was saying. You know, the Jewish people have a specific task, and not all Gentiles need to come in and get into the specific task that they have to accomplish. Okay, but remember, Gentiles, Christians, they say we're connected to Yeshua, to this rabbi. So the person you're connected to is not a pastor. He's not a deacon. He's not a Christian pastor. He's not a deacon at a Christian church. He is a Jewish rabbi. Think about this for a second. Okay, so the rabbi kept the Sabbath. The rabbi kept kosher. The rabbi went to synagogue. You want to eat at his table? They don't serve bacon. They don't serve shrimp. They're going to serve nothing but kosher food. And so you have to understand that. That doesn't mean that you're kicked out. Okay, but it does mean that there's certain things that we should be doing. I'm not saying that you're obligated to doing, but there's certain things that should change.
Sure.
Like change your Sunday to Saturday, because that's what Jesus kept. That's what the apostles kept. Keep that day holy. At least remember it, that is the holy day. Yeah. Think about the Jewish people are special. We should put them up there where they're supposed to be, and we should respect them, and we should go to them to learn. And we should stop all this nonsense and diabolical spirit of anti-Judaism and anti-Jews, anti-Semitism. That is the spirit of the devil, the spirit of the Antichrist.
Yes. Yes. Well said. Well said.
Good.
Very good. Amen. I mean, what a way to end this. You guys kind of came in with a 1-2 punch, James, and then you, Ray, with that. Getting ready to pass the offering plate around. That was seriously, that was just was good. You know, it's fascinating that there is still to this day, there are people that want to understand Yeshua without any connection whatsoever to any Jewish piece of the puzzle. They're going to teach people every day about Yeshua without ever alluding to anything other than the term he was Jewish. They're just going to use that term, and then they're going to leave it at that, because, you know, after all, he did turn Christian, and that wiped away everything from there. But it's mind-boggling. You guys did a fantastic job tonight. So seriously, I'll make sure your paychecks get in the mail tomorrow. Okay. But honestly, great job. Guys, again, thank you guys for tuning in tonight on this episode. James' website, thehiddenorchard.com. We have put it in the last couple of episodes. We put it in the comment section. If you haven't visited it, it is a great website to check out some great articles. You can sign up for an email that comes in and gives you a little bit more information, but there's also some fantastic short podcasts that he puts up there that are very thought-provoking as well.
Those are great.
They are fantastic. They're smooth.
Thanks,
If you ever have road rage, you could put this on. It'll calm you down, man, because his voice is just that beautiful voice, man. But they're really good. They're really good. You need to check them out. Also, Ray brought up a gentleman by the name of Mark Nanos, and I'm going to try to see if I can't find one of his lectures and tag it into the comment section as well. The man is a tremendous scholar, and he's not a Christian, but he's probably one of the leading scholars on Paul. And so it's always a fascinating listen to his work. That's it. We're going to shut this one down. We're going to get back to you again as soon as possible. Blessing to you and your families, and blessing to the ones that you share this with. Have a safe beginning of the week, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Have a good one.
Peace.
Yes.